dive in. We're going to talk about COVID. We're going to, again, if you tune into these, you're going to see themes have emerged. But what we review today will be different than what we reviewed yesterday or what we'll review in the future. So COVID, precision medicine, health disparities, and I hope I said, was it an interdisciplinary approach? Is that what it was, Katie? Whew, I thought, oh my gosh, I may have done the wrong thing. Advocacy or public policy update. And then we've got an array of several different sessions that we all broke out to and went to that we're going to talk a little bit about. So let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to go right into COVID. And I know Stephanie and I think Effie, a couple people went to a session today on, it was called the SARS vaccination and update. I think something you want to give us a little bit, start a little overview of what we learned from that one today.
Absolutely. That, I gotta say, was a very well done session, very informative, and had a lot of really important key takeaways. The first one that I thought was really good was that immunity, as far as vaccination immunity, right, is gradient. So we're like, what is she talking about? And it was basically that you have levels of immunity. So at the very bottom, you have the type of immunity that does not prevent hospitalization or death, right? And then it kind of rises up from symptomatic, but not so severe, to then mild symptomatic, asymptomatic, and then sterilizing immunity. And these are the levels of immunity that people can achieve, right? And the contributors to that is like antibody levels, antibody isotypes, all these stuff. But the main message with that was that there's no set level of immunity that's recommended. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting that she brought up, and she had like this little infographic, and it was basically like two little, you know, those figures that are bathroom signs, like the boy and the girl for the bathroom. She had like two of those, and then a quote bubble that said, "I got vaccinated, but I have low antibody levels. Does that mean I am not protected against COVID-19? And a resounding no, basically, is what she said. And one of the things she said was that circulating antibodies do not equal clinical immunity. So basically, the immunity you receive from the vaccine, it's beyond just antibody levels. There's also things called cellular immunity. So if you have gotten the COVID vaccine and you have done antibody testing and you don't see that, don't freak out. That doesn't mean that you're not immune from COVID-19. So that was really cool.
That's a great one. And let me ask, Deb, you have done that, right? You've had antibody tests. And the first time you got them, you did freak out a little bit because you came back as nothing.
Right. I showed after. So it's part of the Johns Hopkins study that they're testing our antibodies throughout our journey of, you know, pre-vaccine, or post first vaccine, post second vaccine, and, you know, times after that. So yeah, my first one that came back, there were no antibodies detected, and that literally freaked me out because I was thinking, you know, I've got this deletion in my immune system, and I was thinking, oh, is that tied to that? And well, you know, after the second antibody test, it came back with a lot of antibodies, but not on the higher level.
You said that last week, didn't you?
No, I just had one done. I haven't gotten that result yet.
Oh, okay. That was after the booster one then that you just.
That was after the booster. So I'm still waiting to get those results. They haven't been emailed to me yet. But so after the second one, it did show up that I was producing antibodies, which actually I was thinking, phew, you know, at least my was working okay in that manner. So yeah,
But what you're saying, Stephanie, is don't freak out. Like if that situation would happen, that they're saying there's other ways that you're also
Right.
your body
okay.
takes care of it and covers.
That's
Yeah,
important.
I've heard that too.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Exactly.
And yeah.
And that's even for, right? Because I feel like a lot of the media reports on this stuff and they're like, these vaccines are highly, highly effective. And what was cool about this was that these studies were done on rheumatology patients, right? So patients who are on immune modulating drugs, IMD. So that was really reassuring. And I love that. I'm glad she mentioned that. And I was like, oh, we got to share that because I've seen a lot of people like Deb who didn't get those antibodies as far as those studies, but yeah, so that was cool. Another like interesting thing that that they mentioned was that it's as far as treatment recommendations, if you still have not gotten the vaccine. So what she said was that TNF inhibitors do not affect seroconversion. And what we're talking about when we talk about seroconversion, we're talking about the development of antibodies in response to the vaccine. So what she's saying is that if you're taking TNF inhibitors, you don't need to stop them in order to get that vaccine. As far as other medications, Rituxan, they recommended that you schedule your vaccination 4 weeks prior to your next dose and then delay that next dose 2 to 3 weeks. But ultimately, these recommendations, it should be tailored to the individual. So if that's not possible for you, that's still okay. You should still just get the vaccine, and these vaccines are highly effective. So not to worry about that stuff. They also recommended too to stop Tylenol and NSAIDs if you can. If you're not able to because you have daily pain, she said don't worry about it. But that was another recommendation. Another thing that ACR recommended was that every rheumatology patient receive the booster. So now I've personally heard some things over social media about patients not knowing, does that include me? Am I immunocompromised? Because technically, yes, you are immunocompromised. Yes,
Well,
you
if
should
you are on medications, got to clarify that because patients don't realize that if you have rheumatoid arthritis or you have psoriatic, you actually have an overactive immune system, and it's our treatments that strip our immune system. So
right, immune modulating drugs
as well. Yes.
But what's interesting that they said is they weren't talking about only patients who are on immune modulating drugs.
Okay.
They said all. So all rheumatology patients, regardless of the fact of you being on immune modulating drugs like Rituxan, the TNFs, Enbrel, all of these biologics, regardless of all of that, if you are a rheumatology patient, you should get a booster. That's the main message here. And as far as mismatched vaccines, that's been like a hot topic lately. Basically, if you got the Johnson & Johnson, should you get the Pfizer booster? If you got the Pfizer booster, should you get the Pfizer shot? Should you get the Moderna booster? So ACR, what they said was, we don't know yet. They're still researching as far as mismatching. So, but still, if you don't have a choice, get the booster. That's the main message that they wanted to say about that. One thing that I thought was really interesting, and I'll just be really quick on this, and I thought it was funny because I feel like over social media, we've been talking a lot about this, and the question is, can vaccines lead to flares, like disease flare-ups? And I was like, me, because I got such a bad flare after my second one, personally. I mean, I don't know how you guys did.
No, I didn't.
Well, for me, I felt like a lot of joint pain or like more increased joint pain for 4 months. And my doctor found that, because I did the antibody test too, but my situation was a little different where I had antibodies and then gradually now it's lowered because I'm on methotrexate, but that's expected. If you're on methotrexate, studies have come out that showed eventually it will be lowered. But then my IgG level the spike protein was not going down, for about a month or two. It was still high. And then right when that went down, like a weight lifted off my shoulder, and it was like all the pain and a little residual inflammation I had was gone. So it was just my body having more of a response, So I'm just curious as to like who had maybe a more worse response, because after the second vaccine, I did get that little rash. So everybody's body's different in how they respond, like if you have a really, strong T cell army, then another person with RA, your body's going to like rev up, so that's just what my doctor explained.
Yeah, I didn't have the first one, really not much more than fatigue and things like that. Second one, headache, fatigue, but probably better than the first one. And then third one, really not much of anything.
Interesting. How about you, Katie?
The first one was the worst, and then the rest weren't so bad. Yeah. Some arm soreness, but I didn't notice, so long ago, the first one. But I didn't notice really anything else besides my arm being sore. So I lucked out.
That's interesting.
Cool. Yeah, you lucked out for sure. Well, as far as the research is concerned, they revealed that patients reported a range from 5 to 15%, with the majority of those flares reported as mild to moderate. So as far as patients out there, if you're watching and you haven't gotten vaccinated, you're worried about disease flare, usually pretty mild, moderate, manageable, but still go out and get that vaccine.
Yeah, it goes away. I'm fine now.
It goes away.
Yeah, it was just the second, after the second dose, it was worse for me, not the first.
Rheumatologists will across the board or really all agree that it's better to have a flare of disease which we all can have anyway. I mean, regardless, like we can have them for many reasons, but it's better than getting COVID. And especially in a time when the hospitals are very overcrowded, clinics are crowded, it's hard to get in, people in certain areas being turned away, and you don't want to be in a severe situation with your disease that you can't get immediate care because of the hot. So there's a whole thing there. There's one thing I do want to, a couple points I want to bring up here, and I do want to clarify one thing, and I don't know if we know the answer. So yes, all rheumatology patients should get the vaccination and should get the booster, but I think it's when it's available to them. And I just want to clarify that because we're in the United States. Some people, like in Australia, are still on one. So, they've just received one dose. So it depends on where you're tuning in from the world. And also that the booster is a actual third dose for us. And I've got the CDC up right now on my other screen, and it does say who is approved to get the third right now is immunocompromised people, and you are immunocompromised if you are on treatment. So just make sure that you're checking your local, your state, your country, or your government, because if you have, I don't know, so I need clarification. Like, I'm looking this up as right now, it doesn't say if you have like an autoimmune disease, it just says if you're immunocompromised, which would require treatment. So I just want to put like a disclaimer we should check that. I love that you brought up that this was the ACR guidelines. The ACR guidelines, they update these every few months. That's where you should go. If you're a person living with these diseases, they are continuously outlining it in the guidelines. When you pull them up, it has all of the medications by line item that you have to worry about. And they all are different in how long you are asked to hold off or not hold off. And as Stephanie said, individualized. Talk to your rheumatologist, share decision-making, which you'll hear us talk about all the time, the process of communicating with your rheumatologist so that together you can make an informed decision based on your new unique characteristics is equally important now as it is in other treatment for you. There are reasons why some people shouldn't be vaccinated. There could be some medical reasons. So make sure that you're at least having those conversations with your rheumatologist. But I really wanted to point out that just that the worldwide audience that we have here as well. And then I wanted to ask a question, because you may have said this, Stephanie, but I was writing and I don't know if I heard it wrong, so I'm asking for clarification. Because it's a question that I've heard in our community, and that question it has been, now there's in the United States, let me preface that as well. Now they're talking about a 4th shot. So, and I did talk to my rheumatologist, who is Dr. Dr. Kim, or just Al. We'd like to introduce him. And he did say it's still just too early to know, who's going to be sent for that and who's not. So we're going to date this. We're in November of 2021, because things change so often. Who knows what'll happen if you're watching this a month from now. But people are now, I've been hearing people in the community ask, well, can I have too many antibodies? Is it unsafe for me to get a 4th? Did they cover that?
They did not cover that, but
Okay.
what they did talk about was the possibility of a 4th vaccine, a 4th booster, 4th shot, right? And they said it's still too early. We're not there yet, but they are looking at that being a potential for not even just rheumatology patients, everyone. That's what they're looking at right now.
Okay.
So that's the future. And I just wanted to point out too, all of these results that I'm talking about, this is not just for RA. As far as the disease flares, all of that, this is for rheumatology. I mean, RA, PSA, angstpon, lupus, all of that. So if you're tuning in and you have a different disease, like I said, relatively small risk of flares. So.
Awesome. I wanted to just cover a couple points. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the other session, which was about vaccination. There's a lot about vaccination hesitation, which makes sense, right? That's where we are right now. And I'm going to attempt to share my screen here on a couple images as well as I go along here. But essentially it was present. Remember, we are at the American College of Rheumatology. So all of these sessions that we're talking about, in the background, they're showing us research. They're showing us research that's been conducted, and the results basically drive the sessions. So that's where this information is coming from. And so they started by showing us research that was actually done at the end of December 2020 and the beginning of January 2021. And they did it purposefully before the vaccinations were available, to try to see how patients would respond to, will I get vaccinated or will I not? So this was done at Duke University, and there was, it looks like they sent it out to 40, oh, there it is, 16,000, what am I saying? 16,000 people using my chart. So I think a lot of us are familiar with that. It's an online portal, again, depending on where you live in the world. But it's a portal that shares your records. So they emailed out. They did only get 433 responses, but even though that's small, it did teach them a lot. One of the things that they put in there that it's like, I wish they didn't have to, but especially here in the United States, they had to ask if you're Democrat or Republican, because there's a political issue. And I know that there are, the issue is worldwide as far as I should have a choice, I should not have a choice. It tends to be magnified in the United States because our country is based on freedoms. And so that plays in. So they did test that as well. But what came back, nothing surprising, nothing we don't know. The higher age of somebody, the more likely they were to get a vaccination. More people white than any other race. And one of the things that I did find interesting in this was they talked about. We saw this yesterday. There were still some people who said, I would get other vaccinations. I would get a flu shot, but I will not get a COVID shot. It's the second time I've heard that in this conference. Yeah. But I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. So I'm going to let you all say anything you want to add to that while I am trying to pull up my screen.
That is so funny, because I had a family member today, actually, that, what did she say? She was like, I'm not going to give I'm not going to do a vaccine, but I also have never done the flu shot. And I was like, okay, awkward. But I
Oh,
found that
wow.
interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was specifically, they asked for people hesitancy if they had received the flu shot. And remember, time frame here, we're at the very beginning of 2021. And the majority of them were still very concerned that their specific rheumatic condition could be triggered with flare, which you just covered, Stephanie, with the
Good.
disease. But again, here, this is no news to me, rushed or experimental. And so they didn't talk about this yesterday, but I think that does make sense. And some people, I brought up the political agenda because I think a lot of people are saying, well, maybe that's the primary reason why people, just will not budge. But I do think a lot of it also is with this rush. They thinking it's rushed, thinking it's experimental. But just as a note, these vaccinations are not new. These technologies were started a couple decades ago. And when the whole SARS epidemic originally had broken out, it was just, they've been waiting for an opportunity to use them. And I also was watching, I don't even know, it wasn't really a session at ACR, I don't think, as much as it was like a newscast, but they were saying that also you have to remember, people were eager to enter clinical trials. It is so hard to recruit a clinical trial. Seriously. And what was happening in COVID is people were just flocking to be in these trials. So that's one reason why they were expedited as well. They had people. Usually it takes months and months to recruit people for a trial. And it was like there was like, boom, it's enrolled and here we go. So that's really important, I think, to keep up as well. And then I'm going to pull one more up here. Here's another one. Okay. Can you see this one? Which of the following would make you more likely? Okay. So let's look at these. Do any of these resonate with any of you, or things that you've heard in the community? Which of the following would make you more likely to get or consider getting the COVID vaccine? This one was the highest. Evidence that it's safe. And it was very specific to the rheumatology community. Then it kind of goes down. You can't see the end; it's cut off. But it was 0 people said a religious leader or a political figure, which I guess is good news.
Yeah.
But do any of these resonate? Is something you've heard in the community that people are speaking of?
It's funny.
Oh,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's funny that is the number one, because, and I wish I would have gone to your session too, because then it would have made my session make more sense.
Oh.
But at the end of my session, in the conclusions, they had in big, bold, red, underlined letters, the vaccine is safe and effective. And I was like, okay, but wow, that's I'm wondering why it's so big and red. Obviously, now I know.
And remember, this was a survey that was right when they had started. So I do think it's interesting that some of these are still the same. That it hasn't fluctuated now that they've been out and data's come up. Katie, were you going to say anything? I saw your little box turn green. There might have just been a noise.
Oh, I think it was just kind of static.
Oh, okay, Effie.
But I was gonna say,
go ahead.
A doctor rheumatologist telling me to do it definitely resonates with me personally. I'm just trying to think of what I've seen, out in the world. But maybe someone else can speak to that point.
I think people in general are just wondering if it's safe, especially if they're living with a pre-existing condition, and they're hearing things like they're high risk COVID, which has been going around a lot. So I think what was interesting, what they said in this hesitancy slide is that doctors were finding that people were fearful, but when they were able to ask them in a non-judgmental way why they're not wanting to get the vaccine or they're hesitant or whatnot, then they can have a conversation with their patient and find that their concerns are valid. You know, they have real concerns. Not all of them are not, valid or not invalid or anything like that, but they were able to explain to them why they feel as a professional they should get the vaccine based on their situation. So I think it came down to talking to the person face to face, explaining and letting them talk too. And that's what also allowed me personally to feel a lot safer as well. I didn't really have an issue with the vaccine getting it personally, though, I did have my questions about it as well, because at my stage, I do have a moderate severe form of arthritis. So I didn't know how I was going to fare. Then another doctor kind of put into perspective in regards to the flares. And, you're going to flare if you get the vaccine, most likely, and you're going to flare even if you get COVID and you don't get the vaccine. So either way, we're going to flare. So that's another good perspective. And so it's just about how you communicate with your doctor, but how the doctor communicates with the patients and the people who are getting the vaccines too, because a lot of the doctors, they don't take the medications we take. They don't have the joint damage we have. So putting, themselves in our shoes, which my doctor, flat out told me, if I was in your shoes, I would do it. It just makes you more like comfortable,
And that's
and also
exactly
know
the quote.
Yeah, and also knowing,
down
and also
session.
knowing like what my doctor went through. I literally asked her like, what were your symptoms? She told me, and I asked her which one should I get, because there was always so much info like Pfizer, Moderna's better. And, she gave me her opinion, and so I was able to just also ask questions. A lot of people don't though, but that's why the doctors need to have more compassion and empathy and like just more patience. And I think she gave a story about like one person like talking to like a teenager for like 20 minutes or a family for 20 minutes, and then they felt a little bit better.
Yeah.
So
I actually wrote that one down, that she said there's a doctor who was talking about that she thinks there's a little bit of mistrust in the
there's a less trust in doctors now,
and that has sort of emerged over the last decade. But now we're almost seeing, now people are needing that advice. So, we went from Dr. Google just 2 years ago with everybody coming in with their opinion to saying, oh my gosh, now I want your opinion, help me. And she gave that same example, that there was somebody saying, I just don't know. I don't know that I want to get it. And then said, if it were me, and just really resonated. And so next time she saw the patient did get vaccinated. So the onus to the doctors who might be listening out there as well.
Yeah, and she did say for the mistrust in doctors, she was saying like they don't know why it is. It's the way they're communicating to patients. And I think that's why doctors are starting to kind of realize maybe they need to kind of be on like a human level, not a scientific level when they're talking to their patients, so they can understand as well, the benefits of getting it.
I wanted to, go ahead, Deb.
I've got one more point. Going back to what Stephanie had mentioned about that session that you went to, in reading that whole, I went through the whole PowerPoint as well. And it was, again, their audience is supposed to be doctors. So that last frame that was in red was overall, basically it said that we as doctors and rheumatologists need to communicate to our communities that it is safe and it is effective to get. So that was what that overarching like last in red that you were saying, because that really was in red, and that's how it was presented. And I was going to say, in my area, the two factors I've been seeing from folks with the hesitancy is it's twofold. One is they don't want the government telling them to get the vaccine, and it's purely political, and that's their feelings. And then the other one is they just don't know enough. So it's like, okay. And then there's so much false information out there. So it depends on what reputable website you're going on to get your information or where you're going. So that's also a piece that I feel like can be misleading for so many people because they just don't know where to go to get reputable information.
Yeah.
And I also
Well, like-
think the information's changing so fast, and
Oh,
that's another fear
it's true.
factor. And everyone's like, well, everything changes every month, so I'm just going to wait because I don't know what they're going to say tomorrow, you know?
Mhm.
Yep.
So,
I heard that.
That's
Yep.
true. I think that's important to highlight. True, but it's kind of like Tiff said. You know, CDC, ACR.
Yep.
These are
Oh, yeah.
reputable sources to look for information, and you don't have to take our word for it. You can do it yourself.
Yep.
You know?